Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build of the Skymaster XXL Hawk. This is build video number 2 in the series, 3 if you want to include the unboxing. And we're making some good headway on this aircraft. It is an absolute monster, really fun to work on. So stay tuned and we will get back to the build of this Hawk. All right, guys, we got lots accomplished in the last episode. In this episode, I'm not entirely sure what we're going to do yet. Kind of a little bit scattered, but we will get lots accomplished. So our gear is currently curing. We need to get that landing gear put back together, but obviously we can't handle the gear until it is dry. And we're just waiting on our tank mounting pieces to cure. And then we'll be able to put those tanks or the main tank in the aircraft. So not entirely sure what we're moving on to, but it won't be a huge delay for you guys because in like a fraction of a second, we'll continue moving on. So if this is your first time finding my channel, don't forget to give the video one of these, hit that subscribe button down below, and don't forget to hit the bell so you get notified when I release new videos. Let's dive back into this thing. All right, it is the next day and our tank mount here is all done. So that worked out awesome. And our reinforcements inside are all cured as well too. It's amazing how much one layer of heavy carbon cloth makes this area just incredibly stiff. So, and also the ducting is pretty awesome too. So next thing to do is we are going to reinstall this tank, and we need to glue this section right here. So we'll put the tank back in, do up the rear portions. Oh, I also put some leftover high sol just around the blind nut now that the blind nut's in the perfect spot, and that'll hold the blind nuts still as well. So, and then we'll get this reinstalled, and we'll glue this section and let those cure. All right, so with our doors here, what I'm doing is have a piece of probably 1/8 inch G10, and I've just made strips. Now what I want to do is I want to get these glued in place and then shape them afterwards for the hooks. So these are going to be excessively long, but we've made the groove here right on our marks. We will high sol those in place. We're going to make sure we sand the gluing surface first, and that will be a nice solid keeper for the gear doors when we get this all set up. So let's get that glued in place. All right, guys, so we've split the fuselage back into 3 pieces. And primarily the reason I want to do that is I want to paint this section here. So I just want to paint from the top of the rails up to here, no further back than this joint and no further forward than the tank. So the other thing I'm working on here is also our startup tray, as I call it. So I've made our startup tray itself. This will be painted in bright red, and I want it to look something like that. So I was thinking about doing it flat. I was like, no, it'll look cooler if we have a nice angle. So it's actually a 15-degree angle that I've put on it. And how I'll achieve that is I've taken our 1/2 inch maybe 3/4 inch, I don't know what size these are. Anyways, these blocks, added a 15-degree angle to the one side, and we are going to high sol those onto the tank bracket. And that will set in place our tray angle. So next thing we're going to do is get these glued in place. Once those are glued in place, I'll probably use some CA just to hold them in place. And then we'll be able to put our tray on there and get our brackets that are going to need to go on the side of the fuselage here. We're going to get those mounted as well too. Now you can paint fuselage areas like this and deal with it afterwards. So if you do, like if I was to paint all this area and wanted to glue something on the side of the fuselage, like one of those blocks, all we'd need to do is grind down the paint to make sure we expose the fiberglass. But The reason I'm doing all this now is it ends up being a cleaner job because any of my marks that go on the fuselage, pencil marks, things like that, the paint is obviously going to cover all that stuff up, and it'll just be a cleaner look. So working on this, and then we will get that the rear fuselage engine hatch area painted. All right, so we have the tray all done here. Part of the secret to getting this done quickly is using CA to hold these in place. So when you put the block in place with high sol, put a couple drops of CA and some kicker, and the high sol is still wet, but the CA is keeping it in place. So we've got that all set up now, and it worked out exactly like I wanted it to. And it's going to be an awesome place to have all of our fueling and startup equipment. So we're going to paint that tray bright red as well, and it's going to look phenomenal. So what we'll do is also the front tray that goes inside the aircraft, in the front of the aircraft, that came with the kit. I've put 3 coats of primer on that as well to basically make a fill coat. So we'll do the same thing on this guy as well too. I'll put 3 heavy coats of primer on there, and that gets rid of the wood grain. So when we put our finish coat on, it's nice and smooth and shiny. So we need to let those cure a little bit before we do any painting. So what I did back here is I've tightened up all these screws here. This is kind of one of those things that you could forget about doing, and it's probably not a big deal, but all of these bolts and nuts, I managed to get about a turn to a turn and a half out of them. I mean, when they put the planes together, I'm sure they get them tight, but the wood shrinks, I'm sure. Anyway, so we've gotten those done. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put nuts onto these screws here on the back side, and to get these loose, you never have to take the bolts out. But if you do, for some reason in the future, take these bolts and loosen them, and the plane's just traveling around with those bolts loose, like right now it's quite loose, this could come out and it could ruin your flying day because you don't know where that bolt is. So we're just going to put some nylon lock nuts on the back side, and you'll never know they're there, but it prevents those screws from going missing. So we'll get that done as well while we're back here. All right, so we've got the fuselage all prepped off to paint the inside here. So the goal, and we've put a piece of paper down in the bottom, the goal is to basically spray from the rails up, and a little bit of this duct as well too. And I mean, the duct's going to be hidden by the plate, but anyways, that's kind of the goal. So what we're using for this is we're going to use Rust-Oleum gray primer, and then we're going to use the Rust-Oleum stone accents. This is a really nice finish, and it unfortunately takes quite a while to dry, but it's a pretty cool finish when it's all done. All right, so the inside of the center part of the fuselage is all done. So we just primed this area and then did a light splatter coat, and looks absolutely awesome. Really nice finish. It gives a real finished look to that whole thing. And then just painted the trays here. So we've got our front tray, that's painted in Italian red. And that tray, which is our startup tray, which is going just above the engine, that's also in Italian red. All right, there's what it looks like with all the prep taken off. So the tank's gonna fill that space nicely. But this splatter coat takes quite a while to dry. So we're gonna let that dry overnight, but we can put the tank back in. But we are going to put some tubing on the tank, especially on the top fittings, like the vent fitting, because it's so high up in the aircraft. And then this is the time as well that we also need to decide whether we are doing these cheater holes here, because that is our access to the cheater holes underneath, and the tank eliminates those as an option. So I'm going to give that a little bit more thought before we put that tank back in. Front of the fuselage is all prepped off, and it is currently primed. So in maybe 20 minutes we can put the splatter coat on there, and that's going to be a wicked finished look. We did all the way to the front gear mount there, and then just blocked it off past the gear mount, so it looks good. All right, so just went ahead and did it, cut the openings through here with the Dremel, worked out nice. I think it's going to be awesome. This might actually be all we need. That's a significant amount of air intake. The actual size on the underside here, I'll show you, is quite significant, so it's a decent size hole. So now with this done, we can get the tank remounted. We're gonna put some tubing on the tank first. Our vent lines are gonna be right in this area right here for both the smoke and the fuel. So we don't need to add a ton of vent line on there, but it gives me an idea where we're gonna run it to. All right, so tank is back installed. You can see our lines here. So we've got our 6 mil line for the smoke system, our 8 mil line for the fuel system. So we've got a decent amount there to run it to the vent, wherever we're gonna put that. And then we have obviously the back of the tank reinstalled. We installed the plate. The paint is still not 100% dry, so we're just gonna let it sit there and cure overnight. And then we've got the beast sitting in its pretty home. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start at the back and kind of work our way forward as much as we can. Obviously, we're still waiting for the elevator horns. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take out the air brake air cylinder and put some silicone oil in there just to make sure it's serviced and ready to go. And then there's the 2 fins right beside the air brake, there and there, that we need to get glued in place. Now they've already pre-done the slot. There is a former right here, so we do have to slot the fins a little bit to make that all work, but that's the next step of what we're gonna be working on. All right, so first thing we did on the back section here was mount the fins. Those are pretty straightforward. They do require a lot of epoxy, but they like to sit in the correct position, and they just worked out well. The part that sticks inside the airframe there, or the fuselage, sanded all the paint off of it, and there's a whole bunch of holes drilled in there, so it's actually quite easy to get the epoxy in. And what I did here was I placed those in place, and then I put a thick glove on with the glue, and basically ran it, and just kept pushing it in through those holes, and now it's curing. So those will be solid by tomorrow. And what we'll do next on the back section here is we will pop off the fitting, and we'll make sure we put some silicone lube inside the air brake fitting. All right, so just getting the gear door locks shaped here. So I kind of drew out a pattern of what we want to do. The part to the left is right there. It's too long, so we don't need all that excess amount. And then that little half line there, that's actually the line that we need to do a little indent for the little screw to actually slide into. So we've completed this side, and that's what we are looking for. So I'll just close this and then push the servo closed and show you guys what it looks like. And there she is, all locked. So we didn't make it super tight. And reason for that is just to make sure that there's no binding with the servo lock. But what's going to happen during flight is, or at least what's reported happening, is these doors get sucked open. While they'll open up a little bit like this, but they're not going to actually flop all the way open. All right, guys, last couple steps tonight before we call it quits. It's been a long, productive day in the shop. We got all the prep removed from the front part of the fuselage, and boy, does it ever look good. It's pretty awesome. I'm glad I painted this. Glad I did the speckled finish. It looks really slick, really finished. It's nice. All right, and the last thing we're doing tonight is we've pressurized the tanks, both the fuel tank and the smoke tank. When you're pressurizing these, just use your mouth. Do not use compressed air. You don't need any more than the pressure you can blow into the tank. So I just blow it up with my mouth and then pinch it off with the forceps. And we just let that sit overnight like usual. And then in the morning, if we release these forceps and the pressure comes out of the tank, we're good, no leaks. What I did on the vent line side is just heated it up with a lighter and then squished it with flat pliers to seal it off. So that's our last thing for tonight. Good night, guys, and we will see you tomorrow to continue with the Hawk. All right, guys, we are gonna put the gear back together here, but let's do a couple things first. So number one, we wanna check our tanks. So we are going to open them up. The Tygon will get stuck together. There we go, we got pressure in the main tank. And we got pressure in the smoke tank. So both tanks held pressure overnight, which is awesome. So tanks, no leaks. As it's the next day, our rear fins here are all glued in place and they're nice and solid, and that worked out awesome. So next thing we're gonna do is we are going to put the gear together and get those done. Nothing really special, just make sure you Loctite everything. All right guys, so what I like to do when I service the air cylinders and the gear and all that kind of stuff is get some silicone oil. Doesn't matter what you use, basically silicone oil. You don't need to buy anything fancy. This is just like RC car stuff. And while I'm compressing the cylinder one way, I will hold the silicone bottle over top of the cylinder and suck in silicone oil, and do the same thing on this guy. And what that does is it gets a reasonable amount inside the cylinder, which helps to keep everything lubricated and seal it up. So a little tip for you, one of those nice little things to do that makes the gear system on an air gear system last a long time. And then what I'll do is, for us, we only fly 6 months of the year, but what we'll do is put a couple drops of this in your air fill valve before you manually put air in there. And those couple drops that you do every couple months helps just to spread throughout the system, condition your O-rings, and keep everything moving and sealed nicely. And I suppose this classifies as a tip time, and this tip time has been brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. So we've got the right gear all put back together, just need to route the air lines, put them back on the nipples, and that first gear is good to go. All right, so got one gear back together. Now this gear is so big that we ended up using clips instead of zip ties. So previously they had a zip tie on this lower section, a zip tie way up here. We made that a little bit better. 2 clips down there, one there, one there. So we've got a nice solid mounting for the brake line. And then put a little bit of shoe goop on those clips just to make sure that everything stays 100% solid. Everything's gonna pivot in this line right there. All right, so all of the gear is back together and in great working order. We've got all the struts and everything serviced, all the air cylinders serviced. It's in good shape. So before we put the front nose gear back in, I was going to install the servo for the steering. Now, this particular setup is completely designed for a JR servo, which it actually comes with a horn already set up and all that kind of stuff. So this is actually positioned perfectly for JR servo. Now, this is just one of my spare servos. We took the servo arm that came with this kit and put it on there, but we're not putting a JR servo in there, we're putting an MKS servo. So our spacing for the output shaft and all that stuff is really close. We're gonna be using one of these carbon horns in its place. We've got just a couple small adjustments to make, but probably the biggest adjustment is the holes themselves. So the MKS are a lot smaller. These fit perfectly over the little tab. So we've got to drill those MKS holes out a little bit to match the JR position. And so we're just going to play around with this. It's not really a problem at all to make this work. We'll just have a little bit of fiddling, but we'll get that solved. All right, so the gear is all done. The bench is cleaned off. We've got the servo mounted on the nose gear. It wasn't a huge challenge. Basically, it was just more about getting, number one, the servo mounting points opened up enough to fit on the mounting arms. And then the actual servo arm itself, just getting the hole in the right spot, getting the right shim placement and everything. Really slick setup, actually, with this, this setup. It's pretty nice. Very impressed. So, yeah, really cool setup. So next step, we are going to get all of the gear, the mains and the nose, back in the aircraft. All right, now we got the gear back installed in the front there. This front gear is quite a challenge to deal with. Reason for that is these back bolts and nuts are very hard to access through the bottom. So what I used for that is just, you basically need a ball Allen key that'll work at like a 45-degree angle. So this was the key to doing it. But anyways, we got that back installed and we're good. The other thing I totally forgot to mention when we did the equipment overview in the previous video was our Unilite bundle. Here at the Lighter Side of RC, we are a Unilite dealer, and so we got the deluxe bundle from Unilite. This has the Pro controller in it. Anyways, you can see there on the box, it is the deluxe bundle for this aircraft. So that's what we'll be putting in this aircraft as well too. Pretty cool bundle. Basically, this has the nose light that goes on the front there. It's got both colored marker lights on the right and left wing. Those are pretty awesome. And we've got, I think, a red and white beacon. So the red on the bottom, white on the top. So that's the lighting kit that's going in this aircraft. All right, guys, we got parts strewn everywhere across the shop. Not really parts, we got big pieces. So we got one wing, maybe you can see it back over there. Other wing, 3 pieces of the fuselage to this aircraft. There's a lot going on with this aircraft and it's taking up a lot of the shop. But in the next video, what we're gonna start to do is we're gonna start to focus on the back section. Now, we got some unfortunate news today from Skymaster. The elevator brackets that mount on the movable stab, they don't have any in stock and they would have to make them. So we're gonna make our own. Got some, I don't think the camera is gonna focus, but anyways, we got some, what is this? 1/8 inch thick 1x1 L bracket or L shaped material, quarter or corner pieces. Anyways, we're gonna make our own elevator horns for this aircraft. So we'll do that in the next video. And that'll allow us to basically start at the back and work our way forward just like I originally planned to do. So that's gonna be awesome to have that done. And we'll do that in the next video. That's probably gonna be the first thing that we start with. And then once we get that tail section kind of rolling and completed, then we'll be bolting the tail section to the mid fuselage section, which will be also a big accomplishment because that'll mean turbines mounted, pipes mounted, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like this video too was a little bit sporadic. Obviously we're kind of jumping all over the place and doing little things here, little things there, but all those little things add up, of course, at the end to having a complete aircraft. So now with the gear reinstalled in this aircraft, we're making some wicked progress. So those elevator horns are pretty much the other big stepping stone that we have. And I don't know if there's going to be any other challenges. I think maybe mounting the light kit might be a bit of a challenge. Oh, the other big challenge that we have, and I'm not sure if we're going to tackle this in the next video or if it'll be the one after that when we do the wings, but we've got to make lenses for this. Now what we want to do is we want to make clear lenses so the light shows up because we've got a green light and a red light, but we want to basically mold this piece and be able to have that be clear. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm sure we can figure that out. Anyways, so things are looking pretty good on the Hawk front. Looks pretty awesome. So we are going to end this video with that, and it's awesome. It's been tons of fun working on this plane so far. It's a pretty massive aircraft, as I've probably said many times already, and it's going to look beautiful when it's done. So thanks guys for watching the videos. I appreciate it. I love all the positive comments. The positivity is really what I'm all about. So you know, if you fly foamies, if you fly helicopters, if you don't fly, if you fly jets, I love everything that you guys do as well too. We're all modelers in the end. We all fly stuff in the end, and it doesn't matter what it is, but as long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. So thanks guys for watching my videos. Appreciate it. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button down below. Give the video a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video.